or anybody. He was more under
No,
for
it was
himself.
basically it was Gandalf saying, "Well, if Sauron does get to him." So Gandalf sending the dwarves and Bilbo to Smaug was basically a preemptive. It was a preemptive strike instead of Sauron has a dragon.
Right.
Instead, they have a cave troll.
Well, and one of the things that like I said, the way it's a lot of the magical creatures are that they kind of phased out as this world continues to evolve through these ages, and Tolkien mentions things like he had taken things like it was kind of reads like a fairy story and this metaphysical stuff, but he took like horror story, like he has the Island of Vampires in it, and he has werewolves in it.
Yeah. And
things from like European, like Eastern European legends and stuff. He throws all of that into it too.
Yeah.
Into the First Age, and that's another thing I think that's unique about Tolkien. He took these basically horror movie monsters, like vampires, werewolves, stuff from like Eastern European nightmare mythology, and threw that into his fairy tale story.
Yeah.
Which that's another fascinating thing about Tolkien that was different than any other fantasy I've read.
Yeah.
It's just this mix of so many great things.
What I think is also great, what I think is great, and sadly we weren't able to see a lot of them in the movies. You know, you saw some of the great cities like Minas Tirith, you know, and that, but there were cities like Gondolin that are mentioned, but you never actually get to see Gondolin, the great elf city, and very few actually get to see Gondolin, but we do in the Children of Hurin.
No, it's true. And that's why we all hold out hope that could there ever be additional films, but I'm not sure.
I'm trying to see how we could film that.
Yeah, the Silmarillion would be so hard. Especially the first movie, kicking it off, and how the world.
No, it would have to be television. It would have to be epic, serialized television. I think movies would be so challenging.
I agree, absolutely. It's so strange, and some of that first imagery that they start off with in the beginning, and like how that comes about. It would almost have to be animated. A lot of the whole first half of it would have to be animated, because it's such a strange book, and it's so brilliantly intertwined with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but it's its own. Like the First Age is such a strange time.
It totally
and
is.
it's all intertwined, and it's like this metaphysical beginning that kind of morphs into these races of people, and this planet starts to form, and then you start to get into like, you know, societies form, and then by the time you get to The Hobbit, you've got all these different societies of people that are living semi-peacefully after this major war that people have forgotten about. It's a legend to even Frodo. Frodo doesn't believe there was a Morgoth or a Melkor. He doesn't know anything about it.
Well,
so it's just such a weird.
If nothing else, people who watch this Talkin Tolkien who have not picked up or attempted, most people have at least attempted the Silmarillion. It's whether maybe people will try and check it out.
I hope so. It's one of I love them all. I think, but that one is. I think it's the most fascinating to me. The First Age is the most fascinating because it's so different.
Yeah.
It's still Tolkien, but it's just totally something else. It's hard to explain in a show like this. We're trying to do a podcast on it and trying to explain why you should go read it.
And we haven't even gotten to
why you should, but you should. It's brilliant, and I think if you're a fan of fantasy, you'll love it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's bring this back. So we hit the year 5000, which is the last year of one of the eight, of the first couple millenniums, and then the years actually start going 1, 2, 3, 4, and down the road. And this is where we start getting to what they call the years of the sun.
Right.
So this is where a lot more. I mean, we've had battles before then, and now we're getting into more battles. We're getting to see more of what Melkor is doing more. Gondolin is being built. Galadriel is there. So much just starts going on at once over these next hundreds of years.
Yes.
And the Children of Hurin, whenever we get to that.
And if you look at this timeline that we're both looking at here, even this timeline, there is so much that happens in this age that even this timeline is kind of abbreviated. It just jumps from event to event.
No, you're right. Looking at it, jumping all over.
Yeah. So it's like the sun first sets sail, start of reckoning by years of sun, awakening of men and Hildurin.
Now this is the age after. Let's see, is this before? Okay, I know where I'm at. Never mind. I got you. I was a little confused for a second.
Okay, yeah, this is what they call the Grey Annals. It's derived from the Grey Annals. Dating begins anew at 1. Although these years are still held part of the first age. So this is when you start getting even more people coming over. Man is now awakened. Man is now on the earth. The elves have split. They're building their great cities. You have, Gondolin. You have the Avari elves. The dwarves are now in their minds. The dwarves are awakened. A lot goes on, just like in the other ages, a lot goes on in Angband. The siege, Morgoth's forces, the Noldor defeats Morgoth.
Isle of Werewolves. Yeah. I was wrong on that. It's Isle of Werewolves, not vampires. But there are vampires in this.
Yes.
But then you got Hurin, in sort of the late 400s, early 500s.
Yep.
Years, that is. And then like just look at this, like you're looking like, oh, here, like, Minas Tirith is taken, and you're like, wait, what? Like that'd be inconceivable to someone who only read Lord of the Rings. That there was a time, when Minas Tirith was basically captured.
Right.
Yeah, and the sense of how powerful Morgoth is throughout it's really when you read it, it's really conveyed how bad this guy is. He is like your worst nightmare.
Listen, if Sauron is your number 2, you got to figure you're pretty horrible as a number 1.
Yeah, and throughout this age, he nearly wipes Middle-earth completely out. He is nearly taken completely over. And there's a few of the elf kingdoms. One of them, do you guys remember which is the one that's the elf kingdom that's hidden, that nobody's ever seen? They just kind of cut ties to the world. And
wasn't that Gondolin?
Is that Gondolin? Is that the one where they...
It might be. I'm not sure.
They created the great door or whatever, and they hid themselves.
Yeah, because I remember it was they told Hurin and all them, because they ended up in Gondolin. If you leave, you can never come back.
But Gondolin falls in 510. All these people perish, and there's Gil-galad, who becomes High King of Noldor. That's in 510, and then only 80 years later, Morgoth is finally sort of thrust from Arda, and the host of Valinor depart Middle Earth forever. So you're getting pretty late in the game. By that point.
Yes. There's so much going on.
There's a lot going on. We are out of our minds to have tried to tackle this.
Well, we're doing okay. We're doing okay right now. So far, we're doing okay.
Well, one of the central things that we were going to talk about tonight was Children of Hurin. We're trying to get to Children of Hurin because it's that story mainly focuses on Turambar, who is the son of Hurin. Hurin. If you want to read about the actual Hurin, it's all of that stuff is before Turin is born and those battles. That's where a lot of his adventures take place in Silmarillion. Correct. But Children of Hurin is about his children, which would be Turin and his sister.
Yeah, because Turin is born in 464, and just as Beren is meeting Luthien that same year. That's kind of great. 464 was a big year.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Beren and Luthien are the ones that they placed then they placed them in the sky with one of the Silmarils, and they brought Beren back to life. His hand was eaten by the great wolf, and the wolf his belly became fire with the Silmaril, and it's this really wicked story about
rich
a werewolf biting off his hand and running, and then they kill the wolf, and they place him. He's dying, and they give him it's like I think he's the only human man that begets eternal life from the elves.
I think that's
he somehow bequeathed eternal life to live in the sky with Luthien and become the moon or something.
Yeah,
and it's very strange and fairy tale like and metaphysical. It's very cool.
It's super cool. It's a
little confusing.
But I will tell you, and I know you guys will agree, when you tackle Children of Hurin, you must be patient with yourself. Like, you cannot read it. You can't even read it, because you're totally right about Game of Thrones and how rich and dense those books are. But, it's almost like reading something wonderfully alien when you're reading Children of Hurin, because of the fairy stories are it's such its own thing. You got to really take your time with it.
Yeah, and it's almost a separate. There's some changes in the actual Children of Hurin novel. There's changes to the history slightly from the story in the Silmarillion. There's a few different changes. So that if you've read the Silmarillion and you go to read Children of Hurin, be prepared for that. I think there's a disclaimer about that in the front of the book somewhere. If you read the introduction, it talks about some of the changes that were made.
And I will tell you, one of the hardest books to find. I went to like 3 shops. And like the last one I went to, they had 1 copy left of Children of Hurin.
Well, by the way, I have not a first edition literally, but because I bought it literally like the day it came out. So I have this one beautiful hard copy, and then I realized, shit, I should have bought 2. Because one to read and one not to touch, and like a schmuck, so I only have the one.
I've got the 2007 hardback that came out. Is that
I think that's the one I have. Yes, that's the one I have. And anyone who bought that. That's certainly that was definitely the first pressing that you and I have.
Yeah, but my mother-in-law bought this for me. I think within the first couple of months that it was published.
Me too. Yeah, I think I bought it the first week. I think because I thought maybe it could be. I thought in my fantasy life that it could maybe be a movie, and realized they're never going to give the rights to Children of Hurin to be a movie.
And it would be to tell the backstory. I mean, how would you have to do one of those? Almost the way that they did Isildur in Lord of the Rings, kind of those flashback a little bit, like where does he come from? But once you got into the story where he's wandering the earth and he's forgotten who he is, then it would.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way to do it. I mean, there's got to be. It would be a great story. I would love to see it done.
Yeah.
It is such an interesting read. I mean, just getting through it was a task, but it was so much fun to read these stories.
It really is a tragedy, though. The story of Hurin is really tragic, and be prepared for that if you're going to read it, because it's kind of a heartbreaker what happens to him. He's such
I wasn't prepared when I read it, that I didn't realize it was going to. I was like, "Whoa, this is not going to end well."
Yeah, and for such a good person to just be taken down the way I don't want to ruin it for anybody either. I don't want to totally spoil it, but. I'm just saying, Glaurung is the worst. Glaurung is the worst thing that ever happened to anyone.
Sucks. He's just bad.
Terribly. Worse than Smaug. How evil Smaug was in The Hobbit. This guy is, he researches your family, and he goes back to your family and does stuff to them.
It's like the old school mafia. It's like it's not enough to make you suffer.
And he delights in it too. In the story, even at Glaurung's death, he is still delighted at what he's done.
Yeah,
he has no remorse, and he loves what he's done. He is that evil. He has fantastic.
He has a particular set of skills.
Yes,
he does.
I think that's right.
Really
I think that's
evil.
right. I think we will have intrigued people with this. I think I was very intimidated coming onto this particular Talkin Tolkien. I thought we are going to get deep in the weeds and never find our way out. But I actually think we're doing okay.
Yeah, we kind of pulled it out there.
We're doing good, and we're not even done yet.
Exactly.
Some weird first age stuff, and it's really more the latter end of the first age where you can really start to get into like how it connects to the rest of Tolkien's world. And it's really hard to connect the Ainur to Frodo.
Elrond is born in 532, only basically 60 some odd years before Morgoth is thrust from Arda, right? Mm-hmm. So Elrond's coming on the scene just as the Second Age is nearly dawning.
538, yet the third kin slain.
Yep.
And just for people who are wondering, why aren't you talking about the wizards more? The wizards didn't show up till the year 1000 in the Third Age, people.
Yeah, wizards, we're so pre-wizard.
It's so pre-wizard. Just so people know that.
Weren't there, well, I guess Sauron was kind of a sorcerer. He kind of took the guise of a human sorcerer at one point, and was going around. That was during the time that Morgoth was captured, was it not? When they took Morgoth, when they finally took him away to the west.
Yes.
And chained him up. Then Sauron went on his, hey, I was just, I was being told what to do. It wasn't me. And he went around and started, getting everyone to kind of see him as